Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Alan, Nevin, thank you so much for joining us for the Mike Litton Experience. This is your second episode. This is our second interview with you. We did your first one a couple of months ago where we talked about your life story. And we talked about a book that you had coming up called The Next Half Century. We also talked about your previous book, which changed my life, called The Great Divide. And so let's talk about, I know now that the Next Half Century is available. I had an opportunity, as I told you, to read it, and I'm absolutely fascinated by it. I think I told you this, I had a tough time going to sleep at night, the evenings that I was reading it, because it's really impactful. It is very, very exciting what you have found in your research about what the world's going to look like in 50 years. So with your permission, what we're going to do is we're going to start and just kind of go through each chapter and talk about the specifics of each one of those, if that's okay.
That's sure.
Okay. So the first chapter is As the World Turns. So let's talk a little bit about, well, actually, let's start with this. Is it okay if we talk a little bit about how you came up with the idea for the book?
Oh, sure. Yeah, and the answer is it's a follow-on to my first one.
Yeah, to The Great Divide.
And a lot of the data in the new book results from the 2020 census
Okay.
that wasn't around when I did my first book, and some remarkable new statistics that folks like the United Nations Research Division puts out, Pew research, and there are a number of very highly qualified firms that put out projecting data. And now they're going out to 2060, 2070. And the reason why there is so much accuracy, so they say, is when I'm looking at the next half century, almost all people are already born for the next half century.
Right.
So
that makes sense.
we know, they're here, they're born. We know they're going to go to work. We know what education they're going to have, and what it has allowed me to do is look into a number of countries that historically have been third world, and now I see that they're moving up towards second world. And that is wonderful for the United States because we're going to sell them goods.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's really the crux of it.
And advise them, right? We're going to be coaching them and advising them on how to make that leap between the third and second world ranking.
I'm glad you said that because those statistics don't really show up. Another one, when we have major accounting firms and financial firms providing services to those third world countries, that doesn't show up anywhere.
Yeah.
And yet there are literally thousands of professionals providing services to these third world countries.
Yeah, it's true. So one of the things that stuck out to me in chapter 1 was in the last 3 years, over 1 billion people have gained internet access. And in the next few years, another 1 billion are going to gain internet access. That is just unreal.
And it's happening. They don't have to guess.
It's incredible.
It really is. The northern part of Africa is moving very, very fast. The countries in the northern part, starting with Nigeria, which is very heavy in oil,
Right.
and they're moving much faster than the southern part of Africa. And then just, there are 190 countries in the world.
Hmm.
And what is fascinating, at the end of World War II, there were only 50 countries.
Yeah, that is fascinating.
So now we have 190 countries all around the world, and a fairly high proportion of them are third world, but they want to move up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like you said, and I think you said this off camera last time, but um, you know, they are this, billion that just gained internet access, and the billion that are going to, they use that internet access to watch YouTube, to listen to podcasts, to get a feel for what life is like here. And so we become more of a magnet, as you've described before. We become more of a magnet for them in terms of they want to live here, and if they can't, they want a life or a quality of life that's similar to ours.
Absolutely. And their education levels are moving up.
Yeah.
Well, admittedly, it was a low start, but they are moving up, and they are sending a lot of folks to the first world countries to get educated,
Yeah.
and then they go back home and become leaders.
Yeah. It's true. It's incredible. They find out a lot of the leaders that are out there have an American education, right? And they
Yeah.
actually speak English better than just about anybody else in their country.
The president of China, Xi Jinping,
Hmm.
spent a year in the States and speaks English,
Hmm.
and his daughter graduated Harvard.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
So as the world turns, let's talk about the highlights of that chapter.
Well, it's really a look of what's been happening over the last half century or
Yeah.
so.
It's fascinating.
And yeah, and I would tell you the next book, which is called America Tomorrow. I'm looking at the next 50 years of America,
Yeah.
and I'm gathering my research, and I'm looking at the incredible things that we have done, not just we, but the first world countries have done in the last half century, and some things we haven't done.
Hmm.
Remember, it's sort of interesting, for instance, transportation. We haven't improved transportation in the United States since 1970, which is when the first jet went into service.
Hmm.
Our if our train service has gone down, we've hardly built any freeways, and our airplanes and airports are more crowded than ever.
Yeah.
And the key here is that we are not getting places faster today than we did in 1970 when the first jet came into service. The
That's
jet,
hard to imagine.
yeah, it's still 5 hours to cross the country in a plane, and we don't have high speed rail like Europe does.
Right. Or Japan.
And I'm sorry,
Or Japan.
or many of the
Right.
countries. And our automobiles, the cars are certainly better, but we're not getting places faster. If
Hmm.
anything, we're getting slower. If you obviously ever tried to drive in Los Angeles,
Yeah, no kidding. Or Atlanta.
yeah. So home to work travel hasn't improved
Yeah.
in 50 years. So I'm looking forward to the next 50, and I think we're going to see things happen that we don't know about yet, as a
Yeah.
matter of fact.
That's cool. So I'm excited about your next book. I had so much fun reading this one. I can't even imagine what the next one's going to be like. So let's talk about the aging world, demographics. That was the
Yes.
second chapter of your book.
Yeah. We're getting older.
Yeah.
We're and that's all over the world. We're getting older.
And we're not having children at the same,
That's
right?
You got it, and that's a big problem.
Yeah, it is, especially for
And
China. We'll talk about them in a
yeah,
minute, but
oh yeah, China and
yeah.
Korea, and to some degree, the United States.
Mhm.
And the key is that, statistically speaking, a household has to have two kids. If mom and dad don't have two kids, your economy does not expand,
Right,
period.
right.
Now, you can overcome that with immigration.
Mhm.
And we here in the United States, for instance, we bring in, or let me put it this way, we bring 1 million people a year
Hmm.
into the American system legally.
Right.
And we need another 4 to 500,000 people a year to get us up to that two kids per household.
Hmm.
Canada, a few years ago, put in a program where they are bringing in 400,000 people a year because they need that to hit the magic two, if you will.
Gotcha.
And they uh, they they are not letting in uh, retirees. They want young folks, and um, they they're getting them,
Yeah.
and they help them get housing their first year. Um, have I lost you?
No, I still have you.
I don't have you. That is weird. Um,
I have you on
I've
my.
got, I have, um, let's see what, you come back. I'm gonna zoom you in again. Here you are. Okay. And is the camera on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Here we are. Um, Good. Any event, um, there are several countries that are major economies, but are not having kids, and they are suffering.
Yeah.
China today is actually in a crisis
Mhm.
situation. Over the next 40 years, they're going to lose over 200 million population because of the one child policy that Deng Xiaoping put in 1980.
Right.
And then 30 some years later, they stopped it. But by that time, the damage had been done.
Yeah, the curve, they passed the curve, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't have enough young people getting married and having kids, which incidentally has had an amazingly negative effect on their housing market,
Mhm.
and on their car sales. and they're in difficult situation. Japan is in terrible shape. They are going to lose a quarter of their population in the next 40 years. Their age of the people working there, they're keeping them over age 65 in the workforce. And the big problem with these countries that are losing population is that no one wants to migrate there.
Right. They're going the other way. They're coming here.
Yeah. And the big problem, of course, is that the language barriers um, are very difficult. I mean, I think that you would have to learn not only how to speak Japanese, write it. And
Right.
the same goes with Chinese or Korean, Vietnamese. So they come where the learning is easy,
Hmm.
and that's here.
Yeah.
And of course, Great Britain and Australia. And as a result of that, we're continuing to do okay. And the growth states in the nation, fortunately, are close to the border.
Hmm.
So that Arizona and Texas and Florida continue to bring in enough people to make their economies really swing.
Yeah. Well, the demographics are working for them. That's obvious. So
Yep.
let's talk about a country that's having some real issues. And we're talking war dead. We're talking massive migration away, leaving, right? Russia's in the middle of just a rough time because all these people are leaving and a bunch of their people got killed in the Ukraine war. I mean, we're talking 500,000 plus.
We'll never get the real numbers.
Yeah. I mean,
But,
it's just
yeah.
insane.
But, Russia lost 25 million people in World War II.
Yeah.
In the first year, they had 5 million people, uh, soldiers, if you will, die.
Yeah.
And their fertility rate is very, very low.
Mhm.
So they continually lose population. And their young educated people are making a beeline for the border.
Right.
And when you look at the border, the eastern border of Russia, they're sitting up against Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland,
Mhm.
and they welcome the Russian educated youngsters. And it's draining the Russian economy. All they have left is oil.
You know,
They,
I one of the things that I saw that really popped out at me, I had heard from the Ukrainians, whether it's accurate or it's not, I'd heard from the Ukrainians that there were some 60,000 children that had been kidnapped by the Russians and they'd been taken back to Russia. And nobody in Ukraine knows where they are.
no, I've heard that.
When I
Yeah,
read this,
yeah,
now it starts to click, right? All of a sudden, Putin's got to be in a place where he feels like he needs Ukraine. He needs the natural resources of Ukraine. He needs the population of Ukraine. He needs the rest of what used to be the Soviet bloc, right, in Eastern Europe. He needs that badly because of the fact that everybody's leaving. The people who are in the know, the people that figure out how to do this are getting out of there. They're hightailing it.
yeah. I don't remember if I mentioned this in the book, but Russia, being a huge grain producer,
Hmm.
doesn't have anybody to harvest the grain.
Right.
They bring in Chinese.
Yeah, you mentioned it in the book. It's in the book.
Yeah, okay. So you have thousands of Chinese people coming into Russia to harvest the grain.
Yeah.
Just sort of very interesting,
Yeah.
to say the least.
It's fascinating. This entire book is fascinating. So the next chapter talks about China. And we talk about the changing China, the nation that's changing. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, as I have noted, it's shrinking population. They are, by the way, now starting to manufacture cars, electric cars with American specifications, and they're going to be manufacturing them in Mexico.
Wow.
Because of the NAFTA agreement that allows them to go through Mexico into the United States. And they have designed some really neat looking cars.
Yeah.
And so they're going to start doing that because it's just, anything they sell overseas is a net gain in terms of their currency. And the result is that they will be able to stabilize themselves, where in the last 10 years, they have been not only losing population, but losing sales of goods. One of the things that they've not been able to do is put out goods as cheap as they once did.
Right.
And as a result of that, they're shipping manufacturing to third world countries. And as I like to point out, the next time you go into Costco, go to the clothing section and look at labels, and you'll see that most of the goods there come from third world countries.
Yeah.
Hardly any of it comes from China anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Plus, the other part is China has not really developed microprocessors that they need to be a first world country. Taiwan really owns that world.
Yeah.
Taiwan's an amazing little place.
That makes them a real target for China.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we're doing is we are bringing folks to Taiwan over here, and we are starting to develop microprocessing. And President Biden was able to get past something over $500 billion to invest in advanced microprocessing. And now we're seeing, for instance, on the north end of Phoenix, there's this enormous plant that has.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.